All right, fifth grade, I'm going to show you how you're going to start building your mini golf course. And you're going to be starting out with a really thick clay slab like this. And even if it's already large enough for your template, which mine is not, you're still going to want to roll it out a little bit just to compress and smooth the clay. So remember, you want hands on top of the rolling pin. You do not want to roll off the edges. You just want to kind of rock your rolling pin back and forth, putting pressure on the top, not on the handles. And then every few rolls, we're going to flip the clay, and that's going to keep it from getting stuck. Now, I am leaning onto the rolling pin to put pressure. If I don't put any pressure, my slab's not going to get bigger, and it's not going to compress my clay. So I'm going to flip, roll until my slab looks really smooth on both sides and my template fits on top. You do not want to make this slab too thin. I wouldn't go thinner than a pancake because then it's not going to support the weight of all of the three-dimensional pieces you add to it. So once it's the right size, it's nice and smooth, I'm going to hold my needle tool straight up and down, lay my template so that it completely fits on my slab, and I'm going to cut all the way through the slab around the edges of my template down to the mat. You should feel the needle tool kind of scraping the mat here. And when you get all the way around, you should be able to just really easily lift off this extra clay. If it doesn't come right off like this, you may need to go around again. Now, I wouldn't crumble this up or squish it into a ball just yet because you might be able to use pieces of this extra slab. The first thing I'm going to do here is use a little bit of water to smooth out the edges of my slab. So I'm just going to put some on my finger, and I don't want to add too much because I don't want my clay to get muddy. I'm just going to go around my edges because when the clay is dried and it gets fired, those jagged edges will actually become really sharp and rough. So I'm going to smooth those out, and then any other little imperfections, little cracks in the clay or anything like that that I want to get rid of. Now, at this point, before you start adding any of your three-dimensional pieces from your drawing, you might want to add textures. So let's say that, I wanted to make this cloud look textured. I might find one of the texture mats that kind of reminds me of the puffy texture of a cloud. And there's two ways you can do this. You can press it in with your fingers, and this is good if you're just kind of doing like a small area. You can also really gently just roll your rolling pin over it, and that's kind of a faster way, but you'll have to be careful not to get this mat stuck in your clay. So I'm just going to roll that in a few spots, kind of add that neat little texture there. The next thing you're going to want to do is make some sort of edge on your board to keep your golf ball from rolling off. And you might remember doing this last year with our sarcophaguses, but we're going to create just a coil that goes along the edge. So I'm going to kind of squish up some clay. I'm going to kind of squeeze it into that hot dog shape, and then when it's already sort of shaped in a coil, I'm going to roll from the center out, and I like to put this directly on my table, not on my mat, so that I can roll it really long. And it does not need to be very thick. In fact, if I'm rolling this, I want to go kind of like pencil thickness. If it breaks, you do not need to start over. Just use the pieces. Because what I'm going to do here is I'm going to score all around the edges of my slab. And scoring, remember, is scratching, not cutting. So I'm just lightly touching the clay. This clay is wet, it's mud. So even if I touch it really lightly, it's still going to make a score mark. And I'm not scoring a larger line because I don't want it to show once I put the coil on. And then I'm going to add score marks to one side of my coil, just all the way down. If you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 coils, you'll just score each of them. Then I'm going to tap just a little water, like a few drops. I'm not rubbing because I don't want to smooth out my scratch marks. And then I'm just going to press my coil. We don't have to do multiple layers. I'm pressing it into those score marks, and I'm making sure that these score marks on the bottom of my coil touch the score marks on my slab. I don't want to put it on upside down. And see, that coil was not long enough, so I'm going to take another piece of clay, roll it into a ball, squish it into that sausage or hot dog shape, and then roll it out, center out on my table, get it even, smooth. I'm going to score this coil, add a few more drops of water, and start where I left off here. And then if I have extra coil, I can just kind of pinch it off. That's all I have to do. All right, now if you want to make it look all nice and neat, you can kind of match up your edges here, smooth it out a little bit. You want to make sure that this coil cannot come off. So if you give it a little tug, it should feel stuck to your clay. I'm just cleaning up my corners, my edges, smoothing those edges out a little bit. You can always use this orange tool. If you use the tip of it, the kind of pointy part, you can sort of blend the clay. You might remember doing that last year. But this part doesn't need to be too perfect. Use a little water on my finger, just kind of make everything smooth. I'm going to blend those two separate coils there and just make that nice and smooth. Okay, now I'm ready to start building all of my different obstacles. Now, it's really, really, really important that you remember every piece of clay you add has to be scored or scratched and slipped, so add water. So I'm going to start with maybe my rainbow bridge, and I'm going to take my clay, pack it back up into a ball, and I'm going to roll myself another slab. Very gently move this slab over so I have a little space here, and I'm just going to roll out another long slab so that I can cut the shape of my bridge. And you can do this with any of your pieces. If I want my raindrops to be a slab, if I want my sun to be a slab, I can roll out a flat piece of clay, get it smooth on both sides, and then I can just cut. If you're not sure exactly about the shape you want, you can actually just lightly draw on your clay. If you mess up, you can just kind of blend it away. And then once you have the shape you want drawn on, then you can press your needle tool all the way through and actually cut that shape out. But if you do cut the clay, blending it will not put it back together. You will have to make a new slab. So I'm going to make this a rainbow bridge like in my picture. So I'm going to draw, not cut, a few lines on my bridge that does look like a rainbow, and I can paint those all different colors. And then I'm going to sort of position it on here. All right, my bridge is a little too long, so I'm going to cut some off, position it kind of where I want it to go, right about there. And I have to score where it's going to touch. So I'm going to score the bottom edges of the rainbow, and then I'm going to kind of use my bridge here to figure out where I need to score on the slab. So here and here, add a little water, press it down hard enough that I can't pick it back up. And if you want to have a smooth transition here, you will need to blend your clay. If you're doing a ramp or a bridge, I would recommend blending it. Otherwise, you're going to have a little step there that your golf ball is going to have to get over. Then you can kind of get it how you want it, smooth out those edges. Now in my picture, I had some little clouds here. I am going to add those clouds after I fire the clay with a different material or maybe paint. So I'm not going to add those three-dimensionally. Now my raindrops, I do want them to be 3D. Now it would be silly for me to make another slab when I still have some left. So I'm going to cut my raindrop shapes out here. Another method you could use if you're making something 3D is just modeling. Meaning I take a piece of clay, I roll it up, and then I just shape it with my fingers and or my tools. So if I want my raindrops to be more round, I can just sort of shape that with my fingers, and I could even make it stick straight up. Score where I want it to attach, score my board, And if you have a big round piece like this, instead of just pressing it down, I would kind of twist it. And that way it gets stuck to your clay, and I can't pick that back up. It should be kind of suctioned. So I'm going to make the rest of my raindrops three-dimensional like this. I'm going to roll them up, and I'm just going to shape them out. You could put textures on pieces like this too. That's totally up to you. All right, I'm going to add more later, but for now I'm going to move on to my last obstacle, which is my sun. So again, I'm going to take my clay, I'm going to kind of pack it into a ball before I roll it out, because my sun is going to be a slab. I want to roll, flip, roll, flip, roll, flip. And notice that I'm not really playing with my clay because I don't want it to dry out. I'm going to draw my sun shape. I'm going to do a little semicircle here. I'm drawing it first to make it the way I want it. And I'm going to add the rays of the sun here before I cut. So I want that to all be one piece. And then I'm going to have the tunnel for the ball be right in the middle. So now that I have the shape drawn the way I want it, I'm actually going to cut around the edges. And this piece, I think it's going to need a little bit of texture. So gently lift that off. Okay, and I'm actually going to attach it here at the bottom edge, standing up like this. So before I attach it, I'm going to add some cool texture. I've got these little faces that kind of look like a sun here. And because this piece is small, I'm going to use my fingers. Now you could put texture on both sides, but you have to be really gentle because pressing on one side kind of flattens the other side a little bit. So they might be a little more subtle. And this slab is probably about as thin as you could possibly make something that's going to stand up straight. So I'm going to score where it's going to touch, and I'm going to place it here and kind of mark where that goes so I can score this piece too. If you add a slab like this and you press it down and it does not stand up on its own, it is too thin. You will have to make it thicker. But now you can see I've got the start of my 3 obstacles here. I definitely need to add more raindrops. And then one other thing that I'm going to work on right now is my final hole. If you use the handle of your needle tool or the round flat end of the large sized stick tool, you can kind of just press into the clay where you want your golf ball to go and kind of draw a circle. But I want to make it deep, nice and deep, but not go all the way through the clay. So after I kind of make my hole halfway through my slab, I'm going to blend it so there's no ridge there. And remember, you don't want to go all the way through the clay. So this is going about halfway through this thick slab I have at the bottom. And then I'm going to also make another small hole, just sticking that large stick tool straight down. That's where my flag is going to go. So after I fire my clay, I can stick my flag in like that. And then I've got a space for my golf ball that's at least as big as the tip of your finger. Nice and big so you can make a regular size golf ball. Now, one other thing you might need to do to make your golf course is if you need some sort of dome. So a lot of you that are making some kind of tunnel that's round or like a hill, you're going to want to use a strategy called a pinch pot. And for that, you'll want to take a round piece of clay. And I wouldn't make it probably bigger than about a strawberry, because of the size of our mini golf boards. And you might remember this from previous years, but you kind of stick your thumb into the middle, make a little hole with your thumb, and then with your other 4 fingers, you just gently pinch as you rotate, and eventually it opens up that hole until it kind of looks like a pot. That's why it's called a pinch pot. Now you want to do it slowly so that your clay doesn't crack. I like to add water as I'm doing this so that everything kind of stays moist. Now, once you have your little dome, you could potentially cut holes into the side here. I'll show you. I'm going to cut a hole out of this side, and then I'm going to cut a hole out of this side, and that could make a tunnel. And the reason I would want you to make a pinch pot instead of just a big ball of clay is because any clay that gets too thick, I would say more than about like an inch thick, has a really high risk of cracking when it's fired because of the stress. Sometimes moisture gets trapped in there. So if I was going to add some sort of dome or hill, I would want to do a pinch pot instead of a solid piece of clay. Final strategy I'm going to show you is to use this tool called a looping tool, and this is really great if you need some sort of tunnel. So for example, if I want to make sure that my ball kind of rolls in a certain direction, I can use this tool to sort of scoop out a chunk of clay. Now you have to be careful with this tool because if you go too far with it, you're going to cut a big hole in your slab, and we're not going to want that. But if I want to make sure that there's sort of a tunnel or a course here for my ball, I can scoop out clay. And this might also be good for making like a pit where the ball, you might not want your ball to go in the pit. And it's also good for ramps and bridges, things like that. So this tool, you do just have to be really careful. And after you do your scooping, you'll definitely want to go over that area with a wet finger and kind of smooth it out to get rid of all those jagged edges again. Each table is also going to have a box full of letter and number stamps. If you have to add any sort of words, these are really handy because they pop apart like this. You can actually spell your word out by connecting the letters together. Please do not move these from table to table. Every table has the same letters. And if you can't find, two of the same letter to make a word, you can also just stamp them individually. But let's say I want my starting spot here to actually say start on the clay. So I'm going to spell it out. Now the green side is going to face up. The stamps are actually on the bottom, and then you can just kind of gently rock that into the clay. This is great for if you're doing, sports and you've got like numbers on your field or jersey or anything like that. Putting these stamps on here, letters or numbers, will look a lot better than carving it in.